Hi guys. So this video was requested many times and I have been putting it off because I've made a video like this in the past and then made it private, I think. It is, as you probably have guessed from the title, the books that I recommend. And to be honest, I read a lot. I read all the time and I love reading. I have been reading since I was 3 years old and it's one of my favorite things in the world. I feel like we are so lucky to be surrounded by books and thoughts of so many brilliant people that we can just take and study, and things that people spend their entire lives figuring out, we can just read in a week or something. So I decided to do it spontaneously because I have been putting it off. I wanted to write a list of books that I recommend, but then it's just always so many because almost every book that I read I can recommend to other people. Of course, some more than others, and I have a list of books that I've read this year. I started keeping track of that quite recently because I realized that I started forgetting books that I have read, and then I read a couple of books more than one time, which is not always bad because when you come back to a good book, you always find something new for yourself. So there is also a really nice website to keep track of what you're reading, and they also give you suggestions on what you can read. It's called Goodreads, and obviously this is not a sponsored video or anything, but it's a really nice website, and I don't always remember to use it, but when I do, I usually enjoy it. And also I have found a lot of reading material there, so you just rank the books that you have read, and based on that you get recommended new books. Unfortunately, there is not enough time for me to read everything that I want. My reading lists get longer and longer, and I really wish that I had like 50 hours in every day to just read books for 10 hours, but unfortunately this is not the case. So this is what the list looks like. I wrote it in Russian, so I will try and translate it as I go. So here we go. I think I will divide it into sections, and I want to start with philosophy. So I listened to a couple of courses on philosophy. One of them was Crash Course, and I think another one was on Coursera, and I really enjoy it. I have studied philosophy for a year in university, but I was 17 back then. I didn't really care, and now I really feel like I missed out on that because now I'm really interested in this, and I wish I was interested in it back then because free education, you know. So I read a couple of works of Karl Popper, and I really enjoyed them because he is a pretty recent philosopher, but I can see how it resonates with me, what he's talking about. So yeah, I would definitely recommend to just read some things of Karl Popper. And Aristotle, I cannot recommend something in particular because I read maybe 2 or 3 smaller books of him. I don't really remember what they were, like Big Ethics or something like that, and something about politics as well. But I just definitely recommend you Google what he was doing because I really dig his idea of the golden ratio, that if something is too little, it's bad. If something is too much, it's also bad, and it needs to be balanced, something in the middle, in order for it to be just right. So yeah, I definitely recommend that. Also, I think I could put the new book of Jordan Peterson there as well with philosophy. It is called 12 Rules for Life. If you are not a fan of him, you still could take something from this book because it is very properly written. It has really good language. It also has a lot of information, so it takes me a lot of time to like read through chapters. and also he gives a lot of citations for everything that he claims, so it feels, I never checked any of them to be honest, but at least it feels like he knows what he's talking about, so I could definitely recommend that. And I think I can also put Jean-Paul Sartre here as well. I read his Existentialism is Humanism. I really enjoyed it. As far as I remember, it's not a very big book, and also I would put Karl Jung here as well. It's more psychology than philosophy, but it is really enlightening and he is just pretty awesome, so I would definitely recommend reading some of his works, especially about the shadow and the subconscious. These books really influenced me in many ways. Now I would move to fiction authors, which I used to prefer, and now I actually prefer to read more like educational books, but I still come back to fiction from time to time. And one of my all-time favorite authors are Dostoyevsky. He is just so amazing. I love everything that he wrote. I've read most of his books, and he lived a very long life and he wrote a lot of books. One of my favorite ever is Idiot and Brothers Karamazov, and I think he also has short stories which are nevertheless really profound and deep. So if you've never read anything by him, just go and read something, because it's definitely like one of the best authors that ever existed in my humble opinion. But also, one of my favorite authors of all time is Somerset Maugham. He is extremely funny and his books are very interesting. They are not that loaded with morality and information maybe, but they are still very beautiful to read, and they also give you some food for thought. And one of my favorite books by him is Moon and Sixpence, but he also has lots and lots, and I think I've read also most of what he has written, and I truly enjoyed all of it. He also has short stories, and if you don't want to dive into it at first, you can start with one of his short stories. They are also hilarious and sometimes profound. Sometimes he is very bitter about human nature, but it's just so to the point that I can only recommend him. Another book that I read right in the beginning of the year was Grapes of Wrath by John Steinbeck, and I loved his book East of Eden. This book, Grapes of Wrath, is quite heavy. It's not easy to read it always. It's pretty loaded with also information and different emotions, and the ending is just insane. It's one of the most creepy endings of books in history. I know that I'm not the only one who thinks this, but yeah, I really enjoy him as well. I only read 2 books by him, but East of Eden is definitely one of my favorite books ever. It is just so beautifully written in the language and the characters, and it describes the lives of several generations of people, and as it progresses, the rate of how events unfold changes as well. So the more into the future you go, the faster everything develops, and I find it just brilliant. I really enjoyed it. One other books that are pretty classic that I read this year was Orlando by Virginia Woolf, and it is a weird book. I will just say that. It describes a life of a person who used to be a man and then he transformed himself into a woman, or was it the other way around? So, and also it kind of, they didn't age, and it was really weird. It's a very weird book. I don't know if I would recommend that, but it's one of the classics. It is very different. One of the easier ones and also more modern books that I read was Virgin Suicides. I watched a movie afterwards. The movie is also really good. I would definitely recommend to read it. It's more of an easy read, but also emotionally it is challenging to read it because it's literally what the title says. There is a lot of suicide there happening. So yeah, it's emotionally it's pretty heavy, but it's interesting and it's about teenagers. And I think that if you ever were a teenager, you would definitely take something from it. And also it kind of shows the dynamics of parent to child relationships. Another easy book that I've read this year was The Moonstone by Wilkie Collins. I think it is one of the most interesting books that I read this year. It was super captivating. It kept me on my toes the entire time that I was reading it. It is also, I think, a classic, and I definitely would recommend it as an easy read. It's very, very, very nice, and I really enjoyed it. And another fiction that now jumps into my mind and that I really enjoyed was Boredom by Alberto Moravia. I'm really, really sorry if I butcher the names of others. This book is anything but boring. It was very also profound. It is, I think, more or less a romance, but also it kind of digs into the deep nature of a human being and deals with boredom, but not as we know it. It's kind of a different type of boredom, and I could relate to many characters. Well, there's actually only 2 characters, but I could relate to many things that were written in that book. Another book that was super funny and that I really enjoyed was La Vie de Boheme by Henri Murger. I'm really sorry. I will put the name somewhere in here. And it is just really funny. It's an old book, and it's about, I think, 4 or 5 friends that do nothing in life but drink and hang out with the ladies, and it's a lot like the situational comedy of like the 18th century. It's extremely funny. I really, really enjoyed it. It's truly, truly entertaining. And another 2 books that I really, really enjoyed were about Van Gogh. I didn't used to love his paintings as much, but I started really appreciating them lately, and then I realized that there is a lot of books written about him. So the first one that I read was Lust for Life, and it's by Irving Stone, and I think he wrote biographies of many people, and I really enjoyed this one. It's beautifully written. I think it's based on the letters and memoirs of people who were in contact with Van Gogh when he was alive. And after that I got inspired and I read the entire letters to Theo by himself, and it's just the letters that he sent to his brother. But to be completely honest with you, the Lust for Life book is much more interesting because in his letters he literally just complains about how he has no money. But of course there are some really interesting and deep thoughts that he shares, and also I just really like his philosophy of life and how he viewed the world, because he was a very simple person, although coming from a family of really religious people. He had a very non-dogmatic view of the world, and I really, really respect him for that. Another one that I would just definitely recommend to read if you are into meditation or Buddhism or yoga or something like that, it's called Siddhartha. I will also put the name up here, by Herman Hesse, and it's about an Indian about an Indian person who was looking for the meaning of life, and he tried a lot of different things, but in the end he found his peace by the river. It's very deep and it's definitely on my top 10 list now. I enjoyed this book a lot, and it gave a lot of insight into myself for me as well. I think that many people can recognize themselves in this book as well, so I definitely recommend it. I think the last section that I want to share is the books that teach you something, so like self-development books or books about like popular science or something like that. I feel that sometimes I just want more information about things and myself and so on. So the first one that comes to mind is Think Slow, Think Fast. I think it is definitely a bestseller in many countries. For several years it has been, and it just gives you an insight of how our brain works and how thinking works and how to think more properly. And another one is The Subtle Art of Not Giving Mark Manson. It is written very simply, but the moral of the story is as follows from the name. It's literally about how to not give too many thoughts to things that happen to you in life. And well, I mean, it is true. I cannot argue with anything that it says, because really the less you care about the unimportant things, the better for you, I guess. So the saner you are gonna be, and it just kind of gives you motivation to care less about the unimportant things, and also the tools how to do that. Then I came across a series of books about our bodies. I don't know if they are all available in English, because I think that most of them are from German authors. But there is a series of books. I think there is 4. The first one of the series that I read was How to Care for Your Skin Properly by Yale Adler, and it is enlightening. So it tells you about how our skin works in very simple language. It was very interesting, and it taught me a lot about my skin. The main message of it was that you shouldn't overburden it with too much skincare, and also not put soap in it too often. It actually resonated a lot with me, because a lot of what it was teaching was also the same thing that my dad told me since I was little. So I kind of felt that I found proof to his words, and he was very proud of himself when I told him. And the other one that I read was The Surprising Science of Our Gut by Julia Andrews, and it was also interesting, and it tells us about gut and how we poop and all that. And it's also interesting. I learned so many things that I didn't know before. There is also another book from the series about hearts, and one more about vaginas, and I want to read all of them because they are just really easy to digest, no pun intended, and also they are loaded with information. Most of it you might already know, but there will definitely be something that you didn't know, and I think that it's important to know about our bodies so that we can care for them better and so on. So I think that I have been speaking enough for now. I hope that I inspired you to read some things, or maybe read more, or maybe discover something for yourself that you haven't thought about before. Please share your favorite books down in the comments, or maybe give me suggestions on what I should read, because although my reading list is like several pages long for now, and it's getting bigger and bigger, but I always welcome new suggestions, and I'm really happy to discover new things as well. So thank you very much, you guys, for watching, and I wish you a nice week, and love you very much. Be nice humans, and goodbye.